Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the CCZ Coffee Bean. So for those of you following along, CCZ is a new company who introduced a higher end model called the Plume a little while back. It is a fancy gold plated $200 something higher end IM. The DC-1 is a much more lower end, much more affordable 1DD. This is about $21.99 on Amazon US. And it features a couple innovations that they were proud about. And the first is this big back vent. Not clear what's behind that little vent. Maybe there's just a small hole. Maybe that is the size of it, but a bit unique for an affordable budget set. Second is this comfort wing, which you see often on TWS. It sort of helps stick it into your ear, locks it in place, and prevents, a little bit of discomfort from those wings hitting your inner ear, which can be a little more irritating to some people. So they put a nice little rubberized coating on it to make that a little more comfortable. And third are these tips, which have been designed, I think, by them. They added that little bulge at the top, which they say adds to the sound quality. So again, kind of nice for a new company to throw some new unique features into a budget or very affordable set. So kudos to CCZ for doing that. So as I said, $21.99 on Amazon US. There's an $8 coupon, which sometimes rolls up to $10, and that's on the Easy Ear store on Amazon US. So we're going to do a quick run through on this one, mainly because we'll get to it in number 3, but it's very similar to the KB Ear KS1. So while I love the KS1, I'm not necessarily going to review it twice, as this one is very similar. So as I said, the most important thing is that price. It was, when I started doing my notes, $11.99. There was a $10 off coupon. Now it's only an $8 off coupon, but at $11.99, that's kind of that sweet spot for these very affordable recent sets, whether you're looking at the TRN MT1, CCA, CSN, other sets that all hit that, even the DQ6, that $20 and under has been a very popular price range recently. So at $11.99, it was right in that sweet spot at the very lower end of this group. At $14, you're closer to the CCA, CSN, or even the KS1 itself. But so, as I said, wings and tips, we kind of went over that. Those are the two new innovations that they were talking about with Coffee Bean, and cool stuff for an affordable set, but I already talked about that. So graph-wise, like I said, it is very similar to the KB Ear KS1, and you can kind of see the graph is nearly the same up until this little bit where the Coffee Bean is just a slightly lower level. It's a little more relaxed, a little more easygoing is how I would call it. They called it the Coffee Bean, and I thought it was going to be a caffeinated higher energy set, but no, it's actually a more relaxed version of the KS1, and the graph follows it very, very closely. So very similar. I would say it is what I said. It's a more relaxed KS1 compared to my version of the KS1, and I know there's a couple versions of it out there, but mine in particular, it's definitely a more easygoing, a more relaxed, a more longer session version of the KS1 sound. So the sound, if you're not familiar with the KS1, it is your basic bassy V shape, but the Coffee Bean is just a little bit more relaxed, as I said, and maybe that's just the tuning or the shell or the vent. My KS1 happens to be quite boomy, and I use tips to control that big bass boom. And I think especially in the upper mids, there's a little bit more edge to it, a little bit more rise to it. The highs seem a little higher, and the Coffee Bean is definitely more controlled, more relaxed, and I think it sounds a little better at lower volumes. It sort of, I don't know, it kind of goes along with that relaxed, easygoing presentation. At lower volumes, it just sounds kind of fine. When I first got it, I ended up just keeping it in my ears after measuring it at a lower volume, and it was kind of a great background music IEM for me anyway. But if KS1 was a bit too much for you, the Bean is probably going to be better for you. I think there's a a lot of feedback on Facebook about the KS1. Kind of strikes people not quite in the right spot. It's just a little bit too edgy, maybe a bit too aggressive in that upper mid. The KS1 does definitely roll that back a little bit. So the bass still big, just not as boomy as my KS1. And on both of them, I would say they can both be a little tighter, a little more detailed. I think that's a fair criticism for both of them. The KS1 and the Bean tend to be more quantity versus quality. If you're expecting tight, fast bass, that's not what this is. It's kind of a bigger, a little more higher quantity than quality. So that's the bass. So the mids, especially at lower volumes, this one, not as much as the KS1, but this one is definitely a little more recessed at lower volumes. So turn it up so your mids are a little more forward. Lacks that upper mid edge of the KS1. I think those two were sort of related. I think the KS1 at a lower volume has a little more edge to it and a little more detail to it, whereas this one is sort of down a notch, and at lower volumes it sounds a little bit too soft, like you're missing a little more detail, so turn it up. But my KS1 is probably more in line with the BL01, and this one is probably two steps back in that aggressive, edgy sound from the BL01. Treble, again, is kind of relaxed but detailed, not all that far from the KS1. The detailed is actually more surprising. I thought they would have rolled it off or it would have been harder to hear on this one, but it's actually pretty good. For a $10 set or $11 set, it's actually quite good. And I said the same thing about the KS1. They're both right there for their price range. It's kind of really nice. And plus, you get that dynamic driver tonality. You don't have a weird BA pointing in your ear. So just generally having a single DD gives you a little bit of advantage right there. So stage, I think my KS1 does just a little bit better. Maybe it plays better with my source, my Q5K. It's kind of hard to figure out why they are a little different, but for some reason the Coffee Bean feels a little more between the ears than my KS1 does. And I really, really like the KS1. I listen to it quite a bit, so I'm kind of really familiar with it. And the Coffee Bean is not quite there staging-wise, and it's kind of hard to figure out why that is, why that particular bit of it is different, and why I really like the KS1, but the Coffee Bean didn't quite do it. So there's a small change there. Maybe it's just the driver type. Maybe it's just my KS1 is slightly different. So that's about it. That's my quick take on the Coffee Bean, and mainly that is the differences between my KS1 and the Coffee Bean. So despite graphing nearly the same, they are slightly different. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.